Is of Accelerating Agile from agilecoach.com.au. Today we are going to talk about ceremonies, mastering ceremonies. What I'm not going to be covering is the how to run a ceremony. Do this, do this, do this. I'm not just going to go through the agenda parrot fashion and talk about what you do in the ceremonies. I'll cover that. But really, I'm going to focus on the purpose of these ceremonies. I'm really going to focus on 3 ceremonies. There are 5 that we'll talk about, but I'm going to focus on 3, and that's plan, the stand-up, the daily stand-up, the check-in, and the review. So I'm going to jump straight in. Let's get going. So really for mastering ceremonies, when I talk about ceremonies, let's clear this up. We're really talking about events or meetings. Events is a Kanban word and a few other frameworks use that. Ceremonies very much Scrum. But really everyone just calls them meetings. So I kind of dislike sometimes when we use different words for what they're saying things. So you could call them meetings. The reason why ceremonies is particularly good is we'll talk about some examples of ceremonies in a second, and they do kind of meet up with the idea that there's a function. So if we are talking about ceremonies, there's a good meeting has a purpose and a function, but ceremonies always have a function or a purpose to them. They're not just meetings for team meetings, etc., or meeting about Project X, general meeting about it. They're very purposeful, these ceremonies. And I'll talk about that in a second when I talk about some ceremonies in life. So they've always got a set agenda and the set minutes. That I'll definitely be coming back to. The attendees, generally, you know who you need in each ceremony because you're repeating, and they're generally set as well. So if you to pick up one of these frameworks like Scrum, they tell you who's got to be there, and they're always on a rhythm or a cadence. Now, the last episode I did was about cadence, so I'm not going to talk too much about cadence, but the idea that repeats on a cadence is also something. So we know when they're going to be. Finally, so the functions within, let's say, the software development lifecycle or something that happens on a regular basis and repeats, they're always the same. There's always a pattern to them. Now, with a project, there's a pattern as well. If you're going to run a project from end, the life cycle from start to finish, there's a pattern to the functions you have to do. You gather the requirements, you build the thing, you test it. That's the old waterfall way. And that pattern, because it can be repeated, you can set up a set of ceremonies for it. And there's generally 2 patterns, right? There's the repeatable pattern and the linear pattern. And those are demonstrated on the screen here. The repeatable ones are cycle, and we've all seen them with Scrum loves to do it with the cycle all the way around, with the sprints. And linear looks like a waterfall Gantt chart. So let's just talk about waterfall and Gantt charts for a second, and linear patterns, and what an example of a linear set of ceremonies, because you can use ceremonies in waterfall. I'm not saying you can't, but really a very good set of linear um, ceremonies are this where I grew up in England, a christening, a wedding, and a funeral. They're very linear. There's a life cycle to it. It's not a pleasant one, the last one, but that's the ceremonies you'll do. Now, reason why I bring this up is not because I just want to link it to life examples, but because I always try and do that, but because all of those ceremonies, they're all different. Hopefully, you've not been to as many funerals if you have weddings and christenings, but they're all different, but they're the same. And hopefully that makes sense. So if you've been to 3 or 4 weddings, they'll have all gone through the same functions, but they'll have all been very different. So that's how we want our ceremonies to be. We want everyone to feel familiar, that when they're turning up to a ceremony, they know what's going to happen, and they know what to wear, and they know how to behave, and all of that sort of stuff. But they all want to be slightly different because there's slightly different content, different things going on inside them. And that's why I brought up this example. Now, it is a linear example. That would be a waterfall type process, but the same ceremonies can be used in a repeatable repeat. So I've got another life one here that I'm going to jump into. So another example for a repeating set of ceremonies, there's loads, right? Loads. But I've thought about my Woolworths shop. Woolworths, for those not in Australia, is the supermarkets. So I prepare a list, and then I go shop, I cook and I eat it, that's the doing, and then I review how it got and see if I'm going to do the same next time. So and that just repeats every week. I go shopping once a week, and it always follows the same ceremonious thing. Every time I go to the shop, I do the same thing, but it's slightly different. Every time I cook a meal, it's the same, but it's slightly different. So, but we can do that repeated. And what we're really doing there is we're always doing the exact same thing. We're always planning, then we're doing, and we might do it several times, and then we review. With shopping, for example, I do a plan, but I don't plan. I go to the shop every day for every meal. I plan my week out, and I do my eating, and I do that maybe 10 times in a week, maybe more. Um, I don't have breakfast. Don't know why. Lunch, lunch, dinner every single day. And then at the end of the week, I go, I'm probably not going to have those sausages again. I didn't like those. It's not likely. I do like my sausages. So, but the cycle's there, right? You go plan, do, review, plan, do, review, plan. Actually, do, review, plan, do, review. So we've got a repeating pattern there, and so that's what we try and do in Agile. So we don't try and plan the whole thing from beginning to end. We do a repeating round and round and round. Let's look at those three ceremonies in detail. Um, Actually, let's look at those three functions in detail. They're functions at the moment. They're not ceremonies, but we can turn them into ceremonies. Should be very clear about that. Those three things: plan, do, review. They're functions. They're functions of nutrition. So what we want to do there is have ceremonies for all three of those things. But actually, it might be difficult to get just three ceremonies. So I'm going to go through this now. As I go through these three functions, so I'm going to go through planning. I'm going to go through checking in and standing up and doing. I'm going to go through reviewing. I'm going to go through some examples of what you might think planning is, and see if you can work out which one isn't really an agile way of working. So the planning session has these functions. So it could be, do we do our planning in Agile to create a plan of what will be delivered by when until the project is complete? Or in Agile, do we plan the outcomes that we need to deliver for the next increment? However big that increment might be. If you're doing quarterly planning, it might be for the whole next quarter. Just sprint planning. What are the outcomes we need for the next sprint? Or do we plan who is leading what in the next increment and just what goals we're going to get delivered in that time box? So with that time box, which is a quarter or a sprint or a week, whatever that time box is, which one of those is what we really want to do when we do planning? So I'm going to look at one. The first one it isn't, by the way. Straight away, let's just go. First one, we're not doing planning in Agile to create a plan of what will be delivered until the project's complete. That's project planning. That's cool. If you're doing that, I've got no problem with people doing project planning and there being a project plan and saying, look, this is what the project's going to look like. A lot of big enterprises do that, but it's not Agile. It just never will be, okay? So we're not going to talk about that so much. We're going to focus on the other two. Now, the other two, it's a function to plan, but we split it into two. The first half, so to plan the outcomes that will be delivered, either in next increment or increments afterwards, that is refinement. That really is refinement, right? So that's refinement. And in Scale Agile, you tend to do that quarterly planning. You do some pre-planning and you get readiness, but you really finish that off in quarterly planning. So that's to get the outcomes ready. That's refinement. So you refine your backlog, you get your cards ready to say these are the outcomes we want to get. When we talk about planning in Agile, so especially in Scrum, we talk about planning. We're really doing that last one. We are planning what is going to be done. Who is going to do what? We don't want too much detail. You do that task, you do that task. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about saying in the next increment, for the sake of argument, week, sprint, we're going to get three things done, and you're going to lead on that, you're going to lead on that, and I'll lead on this. Now let's go and get it. It's the idea is it's a team collaboration, that planning session, to have an autonomous increment. So at the end of the planning session, you should have autonomy as individuals and as a team to say, we can now go and do this. We're totally empowered to go and get this done, both on an individual level and a team level. So from a planning function, there are two ceremonies really. There's the refinement, which quarterly planning or continuous if you're not doing quarterly planning, and then there's the plan session, which you do at the beginning of each increment after the review. Okay, so that's planning really. I'm going to move from planning. I'm going to move to the second of the three ceremonies three functions I want to cover. That's the stand-up. This is the doing. So as you're doing, loads of autonomy in the team. We really need as much autonomy as we can, but we do want to give an opportunity ceremoniously to check in. And I want to talk about what's the function of doing a stand-up or a stand-up or a check-in meeting. Now, remember, when the guys put this together, Scrum together, they decided to make people stand up for a reason. The reason is because it could turn into anything. You've got the whole team there. You could do anything. They really wanted it to be quick. And I've run loads of teams. If it's not quick, you're failing. You're failing somewhere. You've got to work out why. I might do a whole episode on that. But if we're doing a stand-up, let's have a look at some possible functions. Is it to check in how the team are going and make sure things are on track? Or is it to make sure all blockers are resolved and any risks and issues are raised? Or is it to give experts an opportunity to raise questions and ask for help? So of those three, the first one that I went through, to check in on the team are going and check things on track, you can do it like that. But I used to do it like that when I first became a Scrum Master. And then I realized, actually, you know what, that's not working. It's just not working. I've got to come and offer people help. Let them manage their own time and I'm not checking on them. I've got no power to change anything. So what's the point? I'm much better off focused on the last example I gave you. It's an opportunity to give the experts a chance to raise questions and work together and solve those problems and to ask for help if they need it. And by doing that ceremoniously, they know they can come and get help at any time, in effect. They can still interrupt you in the middle of the day, but they know they've got an opportunity to do it as part of their cadence. Now, that middle one I gave you about make sure the blockers are resolved and risks issues are raised, we can do that in that ceremony, but it will likely take it out of a stand-up. So it's good to get the visibility of them. But remember, we stand up for a reason. Now, you've got your entire team stood up, you don't want to be resolving issues because it's probably going to be one or two people in the team who are involved, and everyone else is going to be like, oh my God, why am I stood here waiting for this to be resolved? So don't use your stand up for that. Use your stand up to raise them, but then get another session set up to resolve those. Get your risks and issues done in a different session. Don't do it in your daily stand up. It really is. It's another way your stand up will start to lose people. It'll start to fail because you're losing people. So I wouldn't bother trying to do the resolve the issues or not resolve the issues, raise the issues. You don't have to resolve them. It can be resolved in a few seconds. Do it. Otherwise, move it into a separate session. Quite often a problem solving session just after the stand up. Let's have a look at the last one, the review, the function of the review. So again, I'm going to go through three examples. See if this is what you think the purpose of the end of iteration sprint review type thing. Is it to showcase to everyone everything we did for the last few months? Is it so as a team we can look at how we're working and improve? Or is it so we can get together at the end of the review and have a look at what we've closed and ensure the team is happy with what we've put into the product? So the other one on this one is it's not really that first one. It's not really about showing off. So I used to call it this because people sometimes call it the showcase, right? I call it the show off. It's not really what it's about. We should have trust in our organization. We shouldn't need that. There is possibly a function within the organization where you want to show what you're doing, but don't get it mixed up with your review. Your review at the end of the cadence is about reviewing what's going into the product. So it's those other two that I'm really going to focus on. So there really are two ceremonies for this function. When you review at the end of an iteration, check how you're getting on as a team, and then check how your product's doing. So how's the team operating? Are we communicating well? And that's retrospectives. You can do that in your retrospective. You have a retrospective look and you see how the team is operating. Where can we get better? Trust me, it's the most important of the ceremonies. I'm going to do a whole episode just on retrospectives. That's how important it is. It is what makes your team great if you do them right. That's why I'm doing a whole episode on it. The review that most people call the sprint review or the product review is to look at the product. Let's have a look at what we've built. Is it good enough? And are we going to release it? Are we going to put it in like that? Or you hopefully can have your product owner and product manager there. So, well, yeah, that's good. Let's get it out. That's slightly better than it was. Let's get it out. Hopefully there's that enthusiasm. So really there's two ceremonies there for one function, the review of the team and the review of the product. We'll call the review of the team the retrospective. So what we actually covered there were five ceremonies, three functions, plan, do, review, five ceremonies, because the planning is split up into refine and commit, and the review is split up into the retrospective and the review. So when we look at them all together, there are five altogether. Remember, we've got a refinement session where we plan the outcomes that need to be delivered. We put the acceptance criteria. We go, this is what we need to do. We need to get better. We need the product to better to do. We need the product improved in this way. Not how we're going to do it, but that's what we're going to do. We're going to get that done. Then you plan incrementally. Now, this is not a linear thing. Remember, you put those in your backlog from the refinement, and then when you pull from the backlog, the planning gets done. So the next ceremony would be the planning, but it might not be the things you've just refined. They may stay there for a few weeks. It might just be the highest priority one that you've refined. It might be some things from weeks ago that you refined. But the planning is always to plan who's leading what outcomes for the next iteration, what we can actually deliver, and what are we committing to deliver by the end of the next iteration. The stand-up, remember, is a stand-up. You are stood up. We're not going to do everything in the stand-up, but it is to give the experts in the team an opportunity, those that have just committed to doing something, an opportunity to get help, ask questions, clarifications. It's on cadence, so they know it's always there for them. It's a tool for them, not for the leaders. At the end of the sprint, we will always do a retrospective. The purpose is to look at the team, let the team talk about how they work together and how can they improve. Now, I want to do one on retrospective. It's not for the manager to improve the team, it's for the team to improve the team. So when I do my retrospective episode, check that one out. And then finally, you will do a product review. What have we done this sprint? How have we improved the CRM. We've got a CRM. We've added these fields. Let's do a review. Now you might invite people to that, but it really is much for the team. You want the team to be autonomous, for them to decide, yes, that's good enough for production. Now remember, all of these go round and round and round. Now I could bring those arrows up before planning, so they go round and round and round. And planning and refinement slightly separate, and that happens on a different cadence. Often in big organisations, refinement will be for a product mix, a suite of products, and there'll be refinement with product managers, and then another level of refinement with the team. There can be lots of levels of refinement, so it doesn't necessarily fall within the same cadence. But all the others go in the cadence. Retrospectives can be done at the end of the sprint. They can be done a day after, a day before. You don't have to do them within the same rhythm, but you've got to do them regular, right? Okay. So finally, the final thing I'm going to cover quickly is how can you actually, because I call these mastering ceremonies, but I think you can master ceremonies if you understand the purpose of them, which is why I've focused so much on the purpose of ceremonies. So now I'd like you all to go to your next ceremony, remember what the purpose is. Try and forget about the recipe you've been given for a minute or two and think, do I actually want this? Is this what we're doing? Because do I want to do that because the purpose is this? So make sure you're hitting the purpose. If you're not doing the purpose, your ceremony isn't right. So what I want to do is look at these of these five. I'm really looking at those three again: the planning, the stand-up, and the review. Retrospective and refinement, I'll do it. They're so incredibly important and so difficult to get right. Not difficult to get right, but they're more difficult than the other three to get right. I'll do them in a separate episodes. But I want to focus on planning, stand-up, and review, and how the number one thing that you need to do to get it right, how to master it, is have an agenda and minutes that live on. So if you really, really want to get good at these things, understand the purpose, make sure everyone in the team understands the purpose, and make sure you're using your board. Because you should be able to run all three of those ceremonies with the following visual. Now, this is Jira. You could be doing it in Miro. You could be doing it on a whiteboard. You could be doing anything. But please have a board. And then all three ceremonies that you have, all three of those, will be able to run from this board. This is the most simple board you've got. It's got everything to do in one column, everything in progress in the middle one, and everything done in the final column. And this is the weekly board. It could be a sprint board. Now, yes, over on the right here, I do have tasks. Don't look at those in your daily stand-up. That's not what it's about. In your daily stand-up, you should be looking in the middle column. I'm just going to go through these, sorry, in order rather than going to the stand-up first. I should go back to planning. For your planning, you should be looking in the to-do list. That's it. You shouldn't be looking at the others because you're planning. So what is there left to do? Now, at the end of the sprint, if you haven't finished work that's in progress, move it back to do because it needs to be prioritized. Just because it was in progress last sprint might not be. It doesn't matter that you might just be doing it, pulling it back and moving it back here. Pull it back, reprioritize, and then put it back into in progress as it moves in progress. So at planning, you are only looking through the to-do list. In the stand-up, you're only really looking through the in progress list. These are the things in progress. Does anybody need any help? That's it. And then when you're done, at the product review, you're going through the stuff that's done. And at the end of the sprint, everything should either be done or you move it back to do and then you start again. It's that simple. If you've got Kanban boards with 15 columns, that's part of the reason why your ceremonies aren't working. You need these columns. Don't let your Kanban board become a process flow. It just don't need it. Let it be as simple as what I'm showing you here. And that's how you'll master ceremonies. These two things, almost every coaching engagement I've been into, someone will say, oh yeah, we set up a board, it didn't really work. And I go, did you have ceremonies oh no, they didn't really work either. Okay, so get your board, get your ceremonies. They will support one another. Don't do the ceremonies, your board won't be kept up to date. Don't have a board, your ceremonies won't work. Try and get both of those things working. So that's the secret. Left it right to the end. If you want to master your ceremonies, make sure your board is simple and make sure it's used. As simple as what you've got on the screen here. 3 columns. To do, in progress, done. Plan the to do. At the stand up, go through the in progress. Not go through the in progress, but because that's incredibly tedious going through each one. Ask anyone, has anybody got anything in progress that you help with? And then finally, in the review, okay, what have we got done? Okay. So, final slide for those who aren't on the audio podcast. I've got slides, obviously. If you're on the podcast, by the way, check the website out. All the content's on there. You can go through the slide. I'm on the second to last slide. It's the takeaway slide. They're the 5 ceremonies. We've really just covered them. We have got ceremonies in life. That's why we don't use the word meetings. You don't call a wedding a meeting. It is a meeting. Of course, it is a meeting with all your friends and family. It's a ceremony because we go through the same thing. All the ceremonies, the reason why they're called ceremonies, they're always the same, but they're always different. We're looking at trying to do, in Agile, we try and do repeatable, plan, do, review, cadence. rather than a linear process. And we have 3 functions that we need to do. The functions are we need to plan, do, review. And to do that, we have 2 planning ceremonies. We have 1 do check-in, which is a stand-up, and we have 2 review ceremonies, which is the retrospective and the product review. So the planning is refinement and plan, do, review. That's it. Simple. Like I mentioned my website a second ago at www.agilecoach.com.au, Agile Coach Australia. There's all these episodes. And if you'd like me to come into your organization and share some of this reorganization, check the website out. That's how to get me in and doing to your entire team. I can do any of these sessions. All right. On that, I will leave you and you have a good day. Thank you very much.